The night she left for the girls' trip, I watched her pack 4 swimsuits and 1 towel. I didn't say a word. The towel was for show. The next morning, I was in the Uber she called for 6:15 a.m. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out, told me to feed the cat, then walked out like she wasn't leaving her entire life behind. She didn't know I had booked a second Uber 2 minutes later, tipped the driver double to follow hers, and told my boss I'd be offline indefinitely. We drove for 3 hours. She didn't notice the silver Prius in the mirror. She didn't notice when she stopped at the gas station and I slipped into the trunk. Yes, the trunk. Spare tire, duffel bag, stale air. I've never felt more awake. Her phone rang at least 6 times. Laughter. Names I'd never heard. No. I told him it's just the girls, she said. He totally bought it. Babe, we have the whole weekend. At one point she blasted music. I felt the bass through the metal. And then we stopped. I waited. The trunk opened, but not the way I expected. It was a guy, mid-30s, gym arms, smug eyes. He laughed. You're heavier than the last suitcase she brought. That's when I realized they knew. About me. About my silence. About my pathetic loyalty. He closed the trunk, but not before tossing in a bottle of champagne and whispering, "Enjoy the show, Romeo." They drove off again. I stayed hidden. That was day 1, and I hadn't even started my revenge yet. I counted every bump on that road like a prayer bead. 23 minutes after the guy tossed in the champagne, the car turned off the highway and rumbled up a gravel drive. From the way they slowed down and the way the tires crunched beneath the weight, I knew it wasn't a hotel. Too quiet. Too private. No voices, no valet, no lobby buzz. This was a rental cabin, the kind with an outdoor hot tub and too many secrets soaked into the wooden walls. The engine cut off. They got out. I stayed frozen, heart in my throat, muscles cramping in the dark. I could hear them laugh as they grabbed their bags. He slapped her somewhere. I heard it in the tone of her gasp. Not shocked. Playful. Familiar. Then her voice, floating like poison through the cracks. You know, he still leaves his phone unlocked. Last week, I changed his Spotify name to Loser Husband. He hasn't even noticed. They both laughed. Loud. Sharp. Like they were trying to echo it off the mountains. She had never talked about me like that. At least, not in a way I was supposed to hear. And now, here I was, the ghost in her trunk, learning everything I wasn't meant to know. They went inside. The lock clicked. A bird cried once in the trees. And then silence. That's when I opened the trunk from the inside. I'd planned this part. The emergency latch worked. I waited another 2 minutes, then slipped out with the caution of a hunted man. The air was cold and sharp. My knees buckled from the hours curled up. I crawled behind a stack of chopped firewood and sat there for what felt like years. I wasn't thinking about revenge. Not yet. I was still trying to process that this wasn't a misunderstanding. She hadn't slipped. She hadn't made a one-time mistake. This was choreography. A well-rehearsed betrayal, complete with props, lighting, and supporting cast. Eventually, I stood. I didn't rush. I walked around the cabin. Windows closed, curtains drawn. But not the back door. It was cracked open, just enough to let in the night air. Inside, their bags were by the couch. 2 wine glasses. Music playing softly. Her laugh again. That high, fake giggle I had started to hate. I took a single photo with my phone. Just one. From outside, through the cracked door, their 2 wine glasses. The reflection of her in the mirror, adjusting her hair. Then I slipped away, back into the woods behind the cabin. I didn't need to see the rest. Not yet. But I had something she didn't know I had. Proof. And I already knew exactly who I was going to send it to first. Not her. Not him. But someone who would destroy her much faster than I ever could. I didn't leave the woods until the sky started to turn from black to a dull, bruised gray. The cabin's windows glowed faintly like a stage set where the actors had gone to sleep, unaware that someone had watched the first act. My phone battery hovered at 12%, and my fingers were stiff from the cold, but my mind was burning. I had spent years feeling like a ghost in my own house, quietly collecting the crumbs of her attention, apologizing when she forgot my birthday, defending her when friends whispered she was distant. Now, sitting on damp leaves behind a stranger's cabin, I finally felt something that wasn't self-pity, it was clarity. She had built a story where I was the background character, the patient husband who would always wait for her. But I had just rewritten the script. I opened my phone and scrolled past her number, past his, until I landed on the one contact She had forgotten I even knew. Her boss. He was the one she bragged about at dinners, the one who mentored her, the one she once accidentally called sweetheart on speakerphone before claiming it was a typo. He was also married with 2 children. I composed a text with the photo I had taken, not a rant, not a threat, just a quiet line beneath the image of the wine glasses. Do you still believe your marketing manager is at the Asheville summit? I hit send. The dots appeared almost immediately, then vanished, then appeared again. A minute later, a reply arrived. Who is this? Where are they? That was all I needed. A second thread began to unfold in real time. My phone lit up with a call from an unknown number, which I declined, and then another text from the boss. Thank you. I'll take it from here. I almost laughed, a sound I hadn't made in months. I could have walked away then, vanished completely, but something inside me wanted to stay close enough to watch the dominoes fall. Not to hurt anyone, not physically, not dramatically, but to finally stop being invisible. I deleted the text thread, shut off my phone to save battery, and crept closer to the cabin just as the first car of the day pulled up the long drive. It wasn't a delivery truck. It wasn't a friend. It was someone she never wanted to see while living out her secret weekend. I crouched lower, heart pounding, realizing I had just started a chain reaction I couldn't control, and for the first time I didn't feel pathetic. I felt inevitable. The car that pulled up wasn't what I expected. It wasn't sleek or suspicious, no black-tinted windows or dramatic screech of tires. Just a weathered silver sedan with a cracked headlight and North Carolina plates. The kind of car that blends into the background of parking lots and parent-teacher conferences. But the man who stepped out of it? He didn't blend into anything. He was older, dressed not for a cabin in the woods, but for confrontation, stiff collar, sharp shoes completely wrong for the gravel, and an expression that said he had stopped tolerating lies long before this weekend. He checked his phone once, looked at the cabin, and then took a long breath like a man about to walk into fire. I stayed hidden behind a thick pine, my breath caught somewhere between panic and satisfaction. He didn't knock. He walked right in. The door wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. They thought they were alone. A few seconds passed, then a voice, low, furious, controlled. Farah, we need to talk. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was nuclear. I imagined the glass of wine tipping in her hand, the widening of her eyes, the fact that he used her real name, not the one she gave at parties or flirted with online under a fake handle. He knew her, really knew her. She had slipped. Somewhere in her web of affairs and manipulation, she had missed a thread, and now it had unraveled straight to him. I crept along the side of the cabin and crouched beneath the one open window. The man was calm, too calm. I got a message this morning. Thought it was spam. Then I saw the timestamp. Saw the cabin. Saw you. Her voice trembled when she spoke, something between defensive and pleading. Derek, it's not what you think. But he cut her off, not with shouting, but something colder. You lied to me. You lied to your team, and apparently you've been lying to your husband too. I flinched at that. My stomach twisted. Not because it wasn't true, it was. But hearing it spoken aloud by someone else, it hit different. She was caught in all directions now. The guy she came here with? Silent. I imagined him sinking deeper into the couch, realizing that this wasn't just a fling gone sideways. This was fallout. Real-world consequences. Careers, marriages, reputations. And I was the match that lit the whole thing. I didn't feel guilty. Not even close. I stood up slowly and walked around the back of the cabin, just out of view, heart pounding. I didn't want to hear the rest of their argument. I didn't need to. I had more work to do. She had built a life on the assumption that no one would ever leave. That everyone, from her husband to her boss to her disposable boyfriends, would always forgive, always stay, always shrink themselves so she could shine. But now she had 3 men in her life, one in her bed, one at her job, and one in the woods with a phone full of receipts. And not one of us was playing by her rules anymore. I opened my phone again. Battery at 9%. Enough for one more move. And I already knew what it was. I didn't walk away from the cabin right away. I wanted to. Every part of my body begged me to leave before someone spotted me, before the shouting turned into tears, or worse. But something kept me rooted in place. Maybe it was the part of me that had waited too long to stand up for myself. Or maybe it was the cruel satisfaction of knowing I had finally become unpredictable, that I wasn't the man she thought she'd left at home. I stared at my phone screen again. Battery blinking red now, 7%. 1 bar of service. I opened my photo gallery, scrolled past the cabin shot, past old selfies she never posed for, until I found the picture. It was 3 years old. Christmas Eve. Her mother had taken it at the lake house. Me and her daughter, arms around each other, both pretending things weren't already fraying. Her mother, Diana, had always liked me. More than liked me, actually. She once told me, while tipsy on mulled wine and peppermint vodka, if she ever lets you go, I'll personally fly to her apartment and slap sense into her. I had never forgotten that. She probably had. I opened a text to Diana. No explanation. No hello. Just the photo of the cabin, followed by the simple line. You told me once. I hope you meant it. I hit send. No hesitation. Within seconds, it said read. No reply. Not yet. I started walking, not toward town, but down the unpaved side road that looped around the mountain. I needed space to think, to cool the shaking in my hands. My mind was racing with questions I hadn't let myself ask before. How long had she been lying? Did she ever love me? Or just the idea of someone who loved her? And more importantly, how many times had I ignored the signs? I kept replaying little moments. The way she stopped humming around the house, the new passwords on her laptop, the call she took outside in the middle of dinner claiming they were urgent from HR. I had swallowed them all like pills with no water, and now they were stuck in my throat. Then my phone buzzed. It was Diana. She hadn't replied with a message. She was calling. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, then answered. Her voice was tight, but composed. Is she there with him? I didn't speak at first. Just let the wind fill the silence. Then she is. And it's not the first time. Diana exhaled, sharp, almost like a hiss. I knew something was wrong. She's been different for months. I asked her straight up last week, and she gaslit me, Emery. She told me I was being paranoid. There was something raw in her voice, something that felt less like maternal disappointment and more like personal betrayal. You want me to come up there? She asked. Because I will. I smiled, not because I wanted her to, but because someone finally saw what I'd been living through. No, I said. Not yet. But you can help. She didn't hesitate. What do you need? I paused, letting the question settle deep in my chest. I had never planned past this moment. But now the opportunity was real. She had allies. She had enablers. But for once, so did I. I need everything, I said. Emails. Conversations. Anything she's told you that sounded off. I don't care how small. I'm going to build the truth piece by piece. Diana didn't ask why. She just said, give me a few hours. I'll send what I can. As the call ended, my phone finally dipped to 5%, and I shut it off to preserve the last drops. The sun had started to rise above the trees, casting gold across the cabin roof in the distance like it was some cozy getaway for people in love. But I knew better. I wasn't just the man she betrayed. I was the only one who still knew how far this actually went. I found an abandoned ranger trail behind the tree line and followed it down the hill until the road leveled out. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken to another human face-to-face in nearly 24 hours. But I wasn't tired. Not even close. I was operating on something else now. Some mix of adrenaline and heartbreak, sharpened into something dangerously clear. I powered my phone back on for just a moment to check messages, knowing I had barely any battery left. One new email. No subject. No body. Just 4 attachments. From Diana. I sat on a flat rock and opened the first one. It was a PDF. A forwarded calendar invite titled Check-in, Final Proposal Review, Thursday, 3 p.m. The invite wasn't for me, of course. It was for someone named Marcus W., attached to a corporate email domain I didn't recognize. But the sender? My wife. The second attachment was a screenshot from WhatsApp. A message she had sent Diana months ago, and one she clearly thought her mother had forgotten. It read, if this goes through, I'm done playing house. I want real options, not some guy who clips coupons and talks about backyard renovations. That one took the air out of my lungs. Not because of the cruelty, I was getting used to that, but because of how calculated it was. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't her getting swept up in something emotional. This was a chess move. I opened the third file, a photo of a whiteboard covered in post-it notes, planning diagrams, and something circled 3 times in red marker, the name of the company I worked for. At first, it didn't make sense. What did my job have to do with this? Why would she be involved in planning meetings for my workplace? And then the fourth file shattered everything I thought I knew. It was a resignation letter, addressed to HR. From me. Only. I hadn't written it. It was dated 2 weeks from now, digitally signed with my name, written in my voice. It said I was burned out, ready for a change, and thankful for the opportunities. All of it sounded perfectly reasonable, if you didn't know me. But I hadn't typed a single word of it. The date it was scheduled to be sent? The same weekend she was on this trip. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight, I had to bend over on the rock just to breathe. She wasn't just cheating on me. She wasn't just insulting me behind my back. She was building a version of my life, without me in it, laying the groundwork, setting up the pieces, making sure when I disappeared, it looked like I wanted to. I was supposed to be erased. Silently, without a fight. I was the soft man in her story, the clip coupons guy, the placeholder. Except placeholders don't write their own ending. I sat up straighter. My mind began to click into place. There were more people involved in this. Marcus W. wasn't just some client. That calendar invite had legal attachments. Proposal files. She wasn't planning an affair. She was planning a merger. She was leveraging something I had. Something I'd built. Or worse, something that was in my name. I looked around the woods like the trees were listening. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about saving our marriage or exposing her to the world. I was thinking about evidence. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was fraud. And I was the liability she needed to quietly disappear. I sat on that rock with my phone in one hand and my pulse hammering in the other, staring at the forged resignation letter like it had teeth. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was a lie built on well-timed documents and digital sleight of hand. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a loose end. And the part that hit hardest? She didn't even need me gone because of guilt. She needed me out of the picture to make a deal cleaner, a transfer smoother, a story simpler. I wasn't a person to her. I was an obstacle. I had worked at the same company for 7 years, longer than she'd even known me. I'd been in the trenches during layoffs, product launches, quarterly crises. And now someone named Marcus W. was negotiating something with my wife, something that involved my name, my data access, and apparently, my digital signature. It wasn't an affair anymore. It was a hostile takeover, and I was being dissolved. I turned my phone off again to conserve the last bit of juice and started hiking back toward town. The cabin was a mile behind me now, still glowing in the morning light like nothing had happened. But I knew once the sun set, everything would be different. She'd come home to find a different version of me, one she didn't prepare for, one she didn't control. I just had to survive the next 12 hours without tipping my hand. By the time I reached the highway, I'd memorized the resignation letter word for word. I had committed the email headers to memory, the attachment names, the calendar timestamp, even the odd choice of phrase she used in the second sentence, a season of closure. That wasn't my voice. That was hers. Polished, manipulative, just ambiguous enough to make sure no one could ask too many questions. I borrowed a charger at a gas station and waited by the microwaves pretending to browse while my phone pulsed slowly back to life. When it hit 20%, I opened my notes app and began drafting something I hadn't written in years, a formal legal memo. I still had access to the internal compliance line at my job. I'd helped write the internal whistleblower policy 2 years ago. I knew the wording. I knew what triggered an internal audit. And more importantly, I knew exactly how to raise a red flag without outing myself. Yet, I copied her phrasing, her timeline, the suspicious overlap between her consulting hours and my network login logs. I referenced conflicts of interest, flagged third-party correspondence from unapproved domains, and dropped in enough corporate keywords to guarantee the compliance officer would raise his eyebrows. I signed it with my real name, but listed my personal email as the only contact. Before I hit send, I hesitated, not because I wasn't sure, but because I knew what came next would break something I couldn't fix. This wasn't petty. This wasn't revenge. It was war. And in war, there's no halfway. Once I pressed that button, I was no longer the hurt husband hiding in the trees. I was the threat. I tapped send. The email vanished into the corporate machine. And just like that, she lost the one thing she never thought I'd fight for, my voice. She forged it once, but I had just rewritten it. With documentation. With timestamps. With a trail she couldn't burn. And as I stepped outside, Watching the sun finally dip behind the hills, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. She wasn't coming home to silence anymore. She was walking into a spotlight. She came back Sunday night. I watched her from across the street, parked in a borrowed car, hidden behind the tinted glass, a cold cup of gas station coffee in my hand. She pulled into our driveway, just like always, like the house hadn't started turning without her, like the walls weren't holding their breath. She stepped out in that same beige travel hoodie she always wore to look casual, one she probably changed into 2 miles from the city line to hide the evidence of her weekend. She didn't notice the letter on the door at first. The envelope was white, unlabeled, taped to the handle in clean symmetry. I had printed it at the UPS store 10 hours earlier. Nothing dramatic, no threats, no rage. Just a single-page statement that I had vacated the house, transferred the lease to her name, and notified legal counsel regarding forged documents and potential corporate conflict. The keys were in the mailbox. Her name was on the utilities now, and I ended with the line, "You don't owe me an explanation, but you no longer control the narrative." She stood there reading it for a long time. Too long. Eventually, she looked up. Not at me. She never saw me. But her face flickered with something I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shock. It was panic. Because she didn't know who else I had told. I let her sit with that. The fallout came quickly. On Tuesday, HR launched an internal ethics review. On Wednesday, her project access was frozen. On Thursday, Marcus W. mysteriously removed his LinkedIn profile. By Friday, someone in finance had connected dots between her email activity and confidential documents exported from my work laptop, the one I had forgotten to log out of before she borrowed it weeks ago. She tried texting me once. Just one message. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't reply, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't know her a second of my voice. A few days later, Diana, her mother, sent me a voicemail I didn't expect. Her voice trembled but held steady. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. I raised a brilliant daughter, but I think I raised her to win at all costs. That's on me too. If you ever need anything, you call me. You were family." That one almost cracked me. But the real healing came weeks later, in the quiet. When I woke up in a new apartment that smelled like nothing. When I started drinking coffee in silence and realized I didn't dread the day. When my Spotify logged me out and I didn't feel the need to log back in. When I bought new sheets, new socks, and a new phone number, all without asking someone else if they liked the color. And most surprisingly, when I got a call from legal at my old job, not to fire me, but to thank me. They had uncovered a serious breach of trust. Because of my report, they'd avoided a multi-million-dollar contract blunder. They offered me a promotion, remote flexibility, and a long-overdue raise. I declined the raise, but I took the freedom. I don't check her social media. I don't ask mutual friends what she's up to. I don't need to know. Because the best closure isn't revenge. It's peace. And now, finally, I have it.